Thank you everyone for joining us for the August 2012 League of American Bicyclists Club Leadership Webinar. I am Scott Williams. I'm the Membership Director of the League of American Bicyclists and your monthly host for these Club Leadership Webinars, where we try to cover topics of interest and use to people that are running bike clubs. Tonight I have with me a veteran of the Club Leadership Webinars, who's Ron Pewitt. He is the treasurer of the Kansas City Metro Bicycle Club. When he first started doing webinars for us, he was with the Kansas City Bicycle Club. So something has changed in between, and Ron is going to talk a little bit about how that happened. And during the presentation or at the end, please feel free to ask the questions that interest you and get the information out that will be useful to you and others who come and listen to this later as they work on their own mergers. Ron, take it away. Thank you for being with us.
Okay. As Scott said, I'm Ron Pewitt with the Kansas City Metro Bicycle Club, and what I've been asked to talk about is the process we went through in merging two bicycle clubs, and we'll even talk about a potential third one. So with that, I'm just going to begin, and basically I'm going to have three things that we're going to be looking at: definitions of mergers versus alternatives, why you would consider a merger. It would be interesting to get input on why other people see the need for a merger, and then our example with some conclusion comments at the end. Okay, if we're talking about mergers, the first thing I wanted to do was define a merger so that we're all thinking in terms of the same thing. And for this example, a merger is basically Company A and Company B that are in existence dissolve and contribute their assets to form a new entity, Company C. Now that's opposed to an acquisition where A takes over B and A continues and B does not. It's also not a joint venture, it's not a strategic alliance, and it's not a partnership, all of which those are defined there. So that's kind of the definition part of it. Why would you merge? Some of your classic answers would be to reduce competition, increase market power, cost savings, economies of scale. What we came up with in our review was that a single united club can better serve the same geographical area. While there were cost savings that we noted, they weren't a compelling reason. So then if you're deciding to merge, what are the impacts of that? Well, certainly you're going to have the two firms that are going to be impacted merging. You're going to have the non-merging firm implications. We're in Kansas City. Probably be a lot nicer if you're a bike shop if you've only got one bicycle club asking you for stuff at the end of the year for the banquet than two. And then your customers are your members, and certainly they're going to have an impact to them as well. Some of the merger benefits. In this, we're going to have an example of this that was real life. I think that one of the strong, compelling reasons to merge, by starting a new company, you potentially eliminate prior liabilities that would have perhaps come forward if you'd done an acquisition or some other type of restructuring. Certainly, by combining, you're going to have more equipment. You should have more staff, or more staff available to fill slots. There was a cost savings. In our example, we came up with about $2,000. And it also allows you to kind of have a fresh start at an entity in case there's certain things that you might want to change that maybe you weren't going to otherwise spend the time doing. Now you've got the opportunity to get the structure the way you want it because you're actually focusing on that with the new entity. Downside, and there's some real downsides to mergers. They take a lot of time. There's tax and legal complications. You've got different cultures with different entities. We found that to be really probably a minor point, because both clubs had a love for cycling, and when you kind of got past, well, we do it this way and you do it that way, it's, yeah, but let's go ride our bikes. So you really, the mixed cultures is a pretty easy one, I thought, to work around, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing. You do have to have some folks, one or two, that I would say need to be capable of doing a system conversion. If everybody on your board has trouble reconciling their bank account, you might not have the right skill sets, because this is way beyond reconciling a bank account. You've got to tie out your membership roster. You've got to, prorate between different membership time periods. So you need to make sure you've got somebody that's capable of doing that. Doing some research for this, 50% of the mergers don't ever, meet their market goals. So that was just kind of an observation. Okay, going into our particular example, got a map up there. Kansas City is at the intersection of Interstate 35 and Interstate 70, kind of in the middle of that map. So in our example, Kansas City Bicycle Club was on the Missouri side of the map, and the Johnson County Bicycle Club was on the Kansas side of the map. So we not only had two different clubs, we're dealing with two different states. And then in bold print, I listed the three rides, the three pay rides, the special event rides that each club put on. So the Kansas City Bicycle Club had a Northland ride, left from Liberty and went up north. There's a fountain tour that's pretty much in the center of the city, and there's a summer breeze that kind of leaves from Lee Summit and goes south. Johnson County had a spring classic and a Lone Star that kind of left from Olathe and went west. And they had a cider mill that was down south. So our two clubs have historically put on each of us put on three rides. We're going to talk more about that as we go through. Some facts for our two clubs. Johnson County Bicycle Club, at the time of conversion, had roughly 220 members. We had Kansas City Bicycle Club, I went with Kansas City Bicycle Club in case that wasn't apparent, had 450 members. And what's interesting is when we started talking about this whole concept like 3 years ago, those numbers were probably switched. Johnson County Bicycle Club was pushing 400, and we were lucky to have 250. So it's interesting that in 3 or 4 years, the changes that can take place. Johnson County had about $6,000 in equipment, water jugs, easy ups, that kind of stuff. We had $11,000. We were actually pretty close on equipment. We had bought a trailer to haul the stuff around. Johnson County always rented a truck. And as I said, we first started chatting about this about 3 years ago. In 2011, we actually were working on it, and I've got a time schedule on a subsequent slide that'll kind of go through and break that down. Both clubs had 5 elected board members that we appointed, or most people's case begged for the rest. At the time of conversion, we had 9 members that were in both clubs. When we started talking about 3 years ago, that was closer to 20. So there wasn't a whole lot of overlap in the clubs, just a sampling. However, we did work well together always through the years. We always reciprocated on member discounts. Members always usually get $5 off of a pay ride. And when we did have a pay ride, approximately 20% of the members attended the ride. We'd have 20% from the other club, and 60% of the ride's attendance were from riders that were not a member of either club. The other thing that's kind of going on in Kansas City, and I just put this in as a side note, and I don't know how many other cities have this particular fact scenario. Kansas City has probably 10 to 15 other pay rides that are put on by various entities and organizations. And they're typically drawing about 300 to 600 riders. And I have worked with a lot of these other rides. The club works with a lot of the other rides, and we typically will let other rides borrow our equipment if they'll give us some volunteers for our rides. And in some of the cases, we actually do share our attendance list, and there aren't a whole lot of folks that from our club that participate in these rides. There were 3 rides that did have over 1,000. That's the MS 150. There's a Tour de Barbecue that's tied to the American Royal, which is a big event in Kansas City, and it's also tied with cancer. They have really drawn in the riders. I think they had close to 2,000 this year. And then there's a Tour de Brew, which is a fundraising ride for a local advocacy group, Bike Walk KC. Another fact is Kansas City Bicycle Club has always had a race team associated with it. That's really how the Kansas City Club got started, was as a result of a race team. And over the years, both clubs have kind of evolved from being a social or a racing club to being more of an advocacy organization to really allow the money that we gain off of our pay ride events to help advocacy at the national, state, and local level. Both clubs have a website. JCBC membership was stored in an access program. They used Active.com for processing their events. Kansas City Bicycle Club has been on Wild Apricot for 3 years. Prior to this, we started in 2009 on Wild Apricot, and it's a service that basically maintains a web page, maintains a membership database, and allows for credit card processing. The other thing noted there was Johnson County had a calendar anniversary date of 4/30, and since we were on Wild Apricot, and actually we did it a few years before, our membership was based on the anniversary date of their first payment. Those rides that I had talked about have kind of changed over the years. Johnson County, the Lone Star ride, they discontinued it for 2 years because they couldn't get volunteers. We had the Northland ride. We couldn't get folks to go up north to ride it. North of the river, Kansas City is a very hilly terrain, and all we could do is draw the people that lived up north. Nobody from down south, where it's not as hilly, wanted to come and do those hills. We even moved the date to be kind of in the fall when it was cooler, trying to eliminate the heat from the equation, and it didn't help. We couldn't draw riders. We had 2 years where we had attendance under 100, and if you're going to go to the trouble to get a ride and have 30 to 40 volunteers, it just didn't seem like the thing to continue. As far as how we were structured, Johnson County Bicycle Club was a not-for-profit Kansas corporation, but they filed an 1120 instead of a Form 990 and paid taxes on all their operations. Kansas City Bicycle Club was a not-for-profit Missouri corporation that had relied on the gross receipts test, and at the time it was $25,000, so that we would not have to file a federal return. But we weren't aware of the tax law change in 2007 that required the filing of a 990N until 2010. And so now we have a problem. And if you go back to those potential liabilities, this is an example of one of them. So what we were struggling with was we had to kind of figure out what to do. We contacted the IRS. They didn't have our corporate entity even in their database. They didn't have it associated with the employer identification number we had. So the phrase "after much review," I can't tell you how much time that took. Kansas City filed a Form 1024 to become a 501c4 and paid the full $850 registration fee. A few months ago, the IRS has accepted our application, and I think we are now in good standing with the IRS. But that would have been an example of one of your participating merger entities having a liability that could, roll forward, because if they didn't accept that and we had to go back and pay taxes, here we're trying to get all the money out and put it in the new club, and, could have been ugly. But we worked through that. So, Kansas City Bicycle Club has been a League of American Bicyclists 100% club since 2011. Johnson County Bicycle Club has not. What we have been doing for a couple of years is we've put on a joint year-end banquet / meeting that worked out very well. The attendance was much better when you have two clubs coming together like that. We were running, trying to have a banquet with 40 or 50 people, and now we're drawing 150 plus. So it worked out much better from that perspective. And I would say both clubs suffer from trying to manage the board and run a club with pay rights. But we've actually done much better on that. We'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, the merger process. What we did was both clubs contributed board members to be on a committee to review and make a recommendation as to a merger. We took 6 months and 3 board members from each club. The result of that was a 6-page document detailing the items considered. That basically was our justification or recommendation for proceeding with the merger, or at least the concept of merger. So we did, in fact, conclude that we recommended the merger. Then both boards need to review and approve a merger for club memberships to vote on. We allowed 2 months for that. One, kind of introduced the concept at a board meeting, make sure everybody understood the consequences, the particulars of that 6-page document, and then we took a vote on it the following meeting. Okay, and then both clubs are going to need to then have a membership meeting, and we allowed 4 months for that, a couple of months to update the members in a newsletter, and then a couple of months to vote and get that process tied down. So that adds up to about a year. So it took us a year to do that. We set up a new corporation and merged the members. And I'm not going into that. That was a whole topic, I think, of another webinar of setting up a new bike club. So that you'll have a whole checklist to go through, but it's the same as if you're setting up a new club. Okay, so once we merged, so 2011 was, all that was going on. We decided to have our merge date 4/30/2012. That happened to be the date that Johnson County Bicycle Club members would have expired. So it seemed like a very convenient date for them to just mail their check into the new entity. As of yesterday, we have about 710 members, but I have a note in there, and this is pretty consistent with the turnover we see. 85 of the 220, or 38%, did not renew. So we're still at about 700, a little over 700, and we've replaced those 85 that did not renew. The equipment, it's the combined, it's roughly $17,000 that we have in equipment. Our new bylaws have that we have 9 board members. We accepted an attorney's recommendation to use an odd number to break tie votes. To resolve the problem of the board members having to deal with club-related issues as well as ride-related issues, we formed a ride committee of about 8 folks, and they are off and they do the rides. And so now when we go to the board meeting for the bike club, we're not diving down into that level of detail, which has really helped us get our focus more on strategic planning for what we want to do and where we want to go. We have a lot of other committees that we'd like to have formed. Don't necessarily have the staffing for that at this point. We do plan to be a 501c3. The stuff is being reviewed right now, and hopefully that'll be filed within the next few weeks. We had originally planned to convert to Club Express as a component of the conversion. We ended up just getting behind and on a lot of the checklists that we put together. So we postponed that. That was going to be too much to do in the amount of time that we had. The main problem was Johnson County Bike Club. They had their stuff in Access and they had to get it over to us. The import from an Excel worksheet is super easy to get into Wild Apricot, but you've got to scrub that data, and that goes back to the skill set of people that are doing accounting conversions. You want to look at that data and try to clean it up before you start importing it into your system. So because of delays associated with that, that was just too much to do at one point in time. So something to consider if you're doing a conversion. Don't merge and change accounting systems at the same time. We did bring back the Lone Star Ride. We had a very good turnout for that, for being off for 2 years. It was normally around 300, and I think we had 225 attend that ride. The Northland Ride, we left that off our agenda because it was suffering from an attendance issue, that not a volunteer issue. So we were able to come up with the volunteers. We have an individual that's very good at doing that. And so we were able, as a joint effort, resolve Johnson County's issue of volunteers and get that ride back online. And I think it was very well received. We got probably 15 emails after that ride saying that they thought it was well done, well organized, so that's good. As far as stats after our four of our 5 pay rides, we still have one yet to go in about 2 weeks. Real close to those numbers before. 38, real close to 40% we're seeing from our members. 62% are from non-members, so that's tracking very close to what our prior percentages were. Pre-registration, it has actually fluctuated quite a bit, but on average it's still running what we were last year, and that was about 70% pre-register, 30% walk up. And we track those because we're buying lunch on some of these rides, and we have to guess at how many are ultimately going to be there. Okay, so after all of that, things that could be better. We still need volunteers, but it's much easier to take the combined boards and eliminate all those duplicate president, treasurer positions and spread that work out, and then also populating the committees. The other thing we found was, now with the merged club, while KCBC's trailer was great for the stuff we had, we've got almost twice the gear, so now we have to rent a truck and use the trailer. I don't think we really anticipated that. A lot of JCBC gear was broken. We've spent a couple of months repairing easy ups, ordering in struts and bolts. And, they had used zip ties to put in for bolts, and we got all those rebuilt. And as of about last month, all the gear is up and running and functional. The only thing I've got are a couple of coolers that the hinges are broken, and those are pretty easy to fix. As I said, we wanted to convert to Club Express, but that was just biting off more than we could chew. Good things, we've got lots of gear to support events, and that may be why those riders were so complimentary because we had all the water that they could possibly drink out there, and it was ice cold on a day that ended up being about 107. And we got comments to that effect. We've even had comments where, gee, you should have done that sooner. But it's allowed us to really, I think, take the combined resources of both clubs and really use them to the benefit of the riders. We've also had our first training class sell out, which is completely new, and we've got 2 more in the queue. So that's exciting because that's certainly, I think, a case for us demonstrating that we are meeting the education requirement of a 501c3, which has different rules. So, in my mind, going back to that pre-seminar survey, if you answered both questions as yes, you should consider a merger because you are having trouble getting volunteers, and you're going to have the staff from both clubs now working on one club, so you're going to eliminate a lot of duplicate positions for president, secretary, treasurer. You're going to consolidate that into one, and that'll free up folks to work on other committees or board positions. And if you've got someone that's got the time, I think it's worth doing. It certainly has been the case for the Kansas City area where we were serving a single geographical area, and you've got 2 clubs. So with that, I'll ask Scott if any questions have come in.
Well, I have a handful of questions, and anybody else here following along, please type in your questions now so that I can put them to Ron. I just wanted to point out a couple of things that came out of the presentation that you might not all know about. Ron, you made reference to the League 100% Club, and that is a program where all the members of KCBC and now KCMBC become members of the league as they join their local organization. And the cost to the club is $15 per member. They send us the data. We send out the membership cards. Those new members get Bicycling Magazine. They get Our American Bicyclist and all the benefits of league membership. And we're very glad to have the Kansas City Metro Bike Club on board, one of a pretty generous handful of 100% clubs. So that actually leads me into one of my questions. I was just curious what the difference in dues was for the 2 clubs, if any, before the merger.
We very little. The family membership was $20 for both clubs. There was a $5 difference, well, sort of, between the family. We were at 25. Johnson County was at 30. But then we also had a membership category called sustaining, which was at 30. So we dropped the sustaining. We moved from 25 to 30 on our family, and that's a good question from the standpoint of being able to tweak your club to where you would prefer to have it, because having that extra membership category, yeah, it brought in $5, but only 20 or 30 people were doing it, so it wasn't a well-used feature, and so it probably makes more sense to make it a little simpler for everyone. And the $5 spread wasn't quite enough, given that they were getting, the benefits of membership for an entire family. So that was an example of where we did tweak the club to be what we thought was a better structure.
Great. And you made reference to some of the older webinars. There is one of the first ones we did. I think we're due to handle the topic again, but it was on membership and membership systems, so Club Express and Wild Apricot and other ways of managing your membership. We also did a webinar, and these are on our club leadership training page, on tax exempt incorporation. Not one of the better webinars, I have to admit, but I did put together a resource which I'm pretty proud of that does cover the topics of incorporation and tax exemption status, if that is something you need for your current club or your future club as you consider this. So the dues were pretty much the same. Were there any other sticking points as you were negotiating the merger heading into it? Anything that was a particular point of friction that you had to resolve, and how did you resolve it?
I think this whole perception of a cultural difference, as I brought out, is one where you can work through that pretty quick. I think you're going to find it's there because both clubs had there are some things we almost had opposite opinions on, and it's simple little stuff. It's like Johnson County Bicycle Club had all 5-gallon water jugs because they didn't want them to be as heavy, so they had 20 of them, but we had like 30 10-gallon jugs. And the reason was most of our rides were where there was not access to water, so I had to deploy more water to cover because they were going to have to drive someplace to get it. Whereas Johnson County, I don't know how they structured this, they just found these places. Most of their rest stops had water available, so all they had to do was go over, fill the 10-gallon jug, and come back. So, but a lot of the stuff was the same. I would say now that I've got all this equipment, things come to mind, well, we ought to probably try to pick a vendor for some of these items so that we only have to order parts from one entity. We've got 3 different brands of Easy Ups. We've got 2 or 3 different brands. Well, 2 or 3 different brands for the water jugs and coolers when you're ordering hinges. So that's kind of nit stuff. I don't think that really impacts anything with respect to a merger. So I would say the only thing, like it's going back to the perception of a cultural difference. We're all putting on bike rides, and it all boils down to kind of the same stuff.
Were there any challenges in meshing leadership? Positions that 2 people wanted to step into, or positions that 2 people wanted to step away from?
No, we didn't have that. Actually, we kind of had the opposite problem. We had to kind of like encourage a person to step up and be president, because and that worked out pretty well because we ended up picking a person that probably wouldn't have. Well, he didn't volunteer for it. It was just kind of, well, why don't you be president because everybody can get along with you. So. No, not really. We didn't have competition for a position. We were kind of at the other end of the spectrum, and in fact, I'll say this: we had our document, and if you see value in seeing our 6-page document, we can attach it to this. Goes into some of the detail, and you can read through all of that. But we wanted to have 4 board members from each club on the initial board, and then the attorney, as I said, well, you probably ought to pick an odd number, so we added 1 to make it 9. So we have 9 on the current board. We haven't been able to get 4 from Johnson County. They're at 3 right now, so we had to pick 2 more from Kansas City, Missouri Bicycle Club. So like I say, there's not a competition. Ours is not an issue of competition for the same position. It's still an issue of getting enough volunteers for the positions that we have.
So I had a question down here. I think I've heard the answer already, but I was wondering if there was any resurgence in interest in the club, in volunteering and participating from people who had been long-term members, maybe of one club or the other. Is it a new club for them? In a good way?
Well, I think the thing that we've done that's different than what both clubs had done in the past and that is we've set up this ride committee that deals with the rides. And so we're not talking, because if you're a board, and we were kind of separate, so we were smaller clubs, and you've got a board meeting and you've got a ride coming up, the ride ends up taking all the time at the meeting because you got to get that dealt with. It's the highest priority right then. So by having the separate committee, they're now dealing with those issues, and now the board can focus on more of the strategic direction of the club. And where we are seeing some of the folks that would have been board members in the past, they're now working on that ride committee.
How is this playing out to the average member? How are people feeling the change and the difference?
Well, from the comments we're getting, I think that we're certainly doing as well, if not better, than what we were individually, because Kansas City Bicycle Club would have gotten 4 emails on a comment for a ride, and like I say, that Lone Star ride, we must have had 15 people send us emails saying that they thought the ride was well done, and that was a hot day. It was 107 when we finished, and the asphalt was 135.
Wow.
Because we use ham operators on some of these rides. The ones that go out from Kansas City, and most of them do, only that Fountain Tour, which was in the heart of the city, is one where we don't use the hams, where we have constant cell coverage. But the ham operators allow us to monitor the ride much better, because we'll have 30 or 40 volunteers supporting the rest stops and hauling gear and that type of thing. They'll layer on another 30 volunteers, and they're all connected with their radios. So you can sit there and listen, and if you haven't had an event where you've had ham radio support, it's amazing, because you know exactly what's going on everywhere for the event. And they really, I think, were one of the major contributing factors for that being such a successful ride on a difficult day. One ham operator hauled in 15 different riders.
Do you feel that, how has it helped with your marketing? Do you feel that you're able to do better outreach? You become more efficient? Have you noticed any benefits in that, or have you kind of had your head down just trying to get the accounting details hashed out?
We haven't done marketing really at all yet. In fact, we barely have had a logo drafted. I would say we're not entirely happy with the logo. It was on the front screen. We did have something created, but it was a volunteer, and they weren't paid, and you get what you pay for. So yeah, we haven't done that, and we're really waiting. Once we get that 501c3, then we've got to get some folks in place to start working that angle, which neither club has been able to work before. And but we've got some alliances. Again, we lend our gear out to some folks, and one of the recipients was that Pike Walk KC advocacy group, and they've got an individual there that's very good at that type of thing, and she's not particularly interested in doing it herself, but she said, I'll be glad to write you a plan, and you can look at it, review it, and take parts of it you want or ignore it. But she can put together a kind of a strategy from that standpoint. But no, the marketing has not really been developed yet.
Has the press taken notice at all, or will that be part of the marketing and promotional plan?
I'm not. No, I don't think the press is taking any notice. We just don't have the volunteer there yet.
Was this whole process complicated at all by the fact that you're in 2 different states?
Not as much as you would think. That was one of the things that we did want to make sure that we acknowledged, specifically that we didn't only look at advocacy from one state. So Missouri Bike Fed and Can Bike Walk are the two state advocacy organizations, and again, you know, I think we're cyclists first and states second, so we just want to make sure that we benefit both states, you know, equally, and don't, you know, forget one or benefit one more than the other, I suppose. But that was just a matter of just having another person be dedicated, and acknowledging that that situation exists.
Great. We've got just a couple more minutes here. If anybody watching wants to put their own questions in, anything that we haven't discussed in this, we'd love to hear from you. If you don't see your question interface, look for a little red arrow floating around in a gray box somewhere in the upper right of your screen. Click that and you should be able to see where to type in a question. Otherwise, I'll assume that I have done a great job in answering follow-up questions, and Ron did a great job in providing initial material, and we were able to cover it all for you. I will tell you, while we're waiting to see if there are any other questions, from our club leadership training page here, which is under membership and then Club Corner, you can find all the old webinars which we discussed before, and tune in or view the presentations on other topics. The next one coming up is on what the new transportation bill means to you. That's on Thursday, September 6, 2012, as we hope to inform and engage more of you in bike clubs. On the advocacy side, the way that federal funding for bikes is done has been cut back and changed, and we want to make sure that we have a strong advocacy base in the states to help make sure that states make the most of the money that's available. There are a lot of ways that states now can opt out of using their money on biking and pedestrian projects, and we don't want them to do that. So you can tune in there on September 6th for that webinar. I am putting together the next handful of webinars. I think I'm going to do some sort of small club roundtable. That doesn't apply to you, Ron, but anybody else listening tonight is with a small club and would be willing to talk about their small club and how they administer a small club. I would love to have you for that. I might be talking to you about your ride committee, Ron, and see if we can get somebody from there to talk about the art and science of arranging rides and maintaining a ride calendar, which we've done a little bit of before, but might be able to touch on in more depth. I have talked and talked, and I don't have any more questions here, so I think, Ron, we have done a great job. So thank you very much for your presenting on this topic. I think it was important tonight and will continue to be important as people tune in and listen as it applies to them once I get the recording uploaded. Any final thoughts?
Well, we did. I didn't talk about it. Back on the map, Leavenworth, which is this town north and west of Kansas City, also has a bicycle club. They have contacted us, and some of their board members were interested in merging, and so there may be, you know, another one coming along to where we actually have a more of a regional club. I know that they have kicked it around, and I think they have certain board members that are just adamantly opposed to it, and certain ones that say that it's probably something they want to think about. I've offered to meet with them, and they haven't contacted me, so I'm guessing that the folks that are adamantly opposed to it are prevailing. But I think, again, if you get in there and if you can talk to the people and say, look, you've got 2 presidents, you've got 2 secretaries, you've got all this duplication structurally and equipment-wise, and there is no way that we're going to ever not put on a ride that was put on before that was successful, and we always work in the Kansas City area. I talked about those other rides. We always try to make sure we never step on anybody else's ride date and double book a weekend. So I think with all of that, it's hard to convince me not to merge.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Have a great night.
Thank you.